Okay, now that we've talked about fabric, I'm going to show you how to take the fabric and lay it out and how to set your pieces on and how to follow a fabric layout guide on a pattern. So then depending on what project you pick or what you want to sew, you understand how to take that diagram and the fabric that you've chosen and put the two together, and then you can create the project that you're looking to make. Okay, here we have some fabric laid out. I'm just going to kind of go over with you the terms that you'll see in your pattern as you're reading through. So the fabric has two sides. You have the right side, which is the finished side of the fabric. So on the denim, it's the dark blue. And then on the inside, which is referred to as the wrong side, is the inside of the piece, which is usually lighter or where there's no print. So on this cotton fabric, which is floral on the front side, then this is considered the right side. And this is the wrong side. It's just the faded inside view of it. So when you're ready to lay out your pattern, you will fold your fabric right sides together. Usually it's just folded in half or folded as much as you're going to need to use so that you have a fold side and then you'll have your raw edge side. And you can look at your diagram to just decide how much fabric you need from the piece you have cut. So let's take a closer look down on the fabric and the pattern pieces, and I'll show you how to lay them out and what the terms on the pieces mean and how you would place them, pin them, and cut them out on the pieces of fabric. Here we have a pattern. This is the dress form pattern for 18-inch dolls like American Girl. And I'm just going to kind of go over with you how it looks. The patterns that we sell on Pixie Fair are all the same format for the most part. They print out as a PDF, and then you'll have your supply page, title page, and then a page that shows your cutting layout, diagram, what the cut pieces will look like, and then they will include pattern pieces that you would cut out of the paper and use on your fabric. They also include the step-by-step instructions. I don't have that printed out in front of me right here. This pattern is specifying a medium weight fabric. It's not very specific as to the types of fabric, which means basically you can use any type of non-stretchy fabric for these. You can use a cotton, a woven cotton, something heavier like a corduroy or like a textured wool, or even like a canvas, something that feels like a little bit more, you know, like some of the dress forms that are that khaki colored, like textured muslin, stuff like that. So for a dress form, you can be creative. You can actually use a sequined fabric or anything like that. So this specifies 1/3 of a yard that's cut straight off the bolt because you need that height, which is at least 9 inches in height. The piece I have in front of me is actually cut from a fat quarter, which is a different cut of fabric. So it's only 1/4 yard and it's plenty of fabric for what we're doing. So if you just look at your pattern pieces, you should be able to estimate if you need the full yardage that's written down or if you can use a fat quarter or something like that. This pattern doesn't have very many pieces. It has a piece for the front and back and a piece for the sides. The fabric is folded in half. You can see right here it's showing that there's 2 layers of fabric. This is the fold side. None of these pieces are cut on a fold, so for this example, the fold is not as important. But they are folded so that you have mirror images of the 2 pieces that you're going to cut. On the pattern piece itself, it's labeled and it tells you this is the front and the back, and you need to cut 2 pieces, which is why we're folding the fabric in half. And then same for the side, it's also cut 2. Sometimes you'll have a pattern that says cut 1 or cut 1 on fold. For example, this piece right here is from the t-shirt pattern. It shows a line right here. This line of the pattern piece needs to be laid right on the fold line of your fabric. So make sure your grain is going in the right direction. You have your fabric folded. This will be placed on there and you're cutting 1 but on the fold. So your fabric is still folded for double thickness, but when you cut it out and you don't cut on this line and open it up, you have 1 piece, which is why it says cut 1 on fold. When you're cutting out these pattern pieces, be sure to cut right on the line. Don't cut off the line and don't leave excess white on the outside so that you get the exact right size pattern piece for these projects. Okay, so here we have the cutout pieces. Just a few other things I'm going to point out on the pattern pieces themselves. This is showing you right here the grain line. So you have an arrow that says lengthwise grain. So the grain of the fabric should go up and down. So the top of the print or the stretch, whatever it is that the way your fabric lays, you want to make sure that you keep this straight along the grain. And that shows on both pattern pieces. And then they're cut out the same. So when they get sewn together, they're all lined up on the same grain line. The other thing that this shows you is this is the top side of the pattern piece. Same here, this is the top neck opening up here. And this is a small notch right here, which will line up with your shoulder seam. So when you sew these pieces and you have this cut out, I'll show you how to cut the notch for this. So as you put this part together and you pin this in, you'll line up this notch that's cut from the fabric with the seam from the shoulder. And then you'll be sure that your piece is centered properly, and then the pattern turns out the way it's supposed to turn out. So to begin, you can see we have plenty of fabric here. Like I said, this is a fat quarter. This is folded in half, so I have 2 layers. You just need to pin and cut through both layers, but just cut out one, but it'll give you 2 pieces, and then the same with this. So I would just set these pieces on here so that you're wasting as little fabric as possible. So just to be sure that your edges are lined up, you can have it a little bit above the edge and just trim that off. So you'll set this on, and then you'll take your pins, and it's best to pin away, have the point away from the direction that you'll be cutting. This right here is a good example of not being pinned properly. You can see right here that the head of the pin is actually laying right on the cut line. So there's no way I can pull my scissors along here and cut right through that. I'll either break my scissors or break the pin. And you don't want to cut around it because then you're not following your pattern piece. So the better way to pin that would be to take your pin and just go right up and pin right along the stitching line. So you have that in there, it's pinned in here, it's out of the way for me to cut. It's also pointing upwards, so this is the sharp end of the pin, and if I have my scissors and I'm cutting in this direction, my hand is going to guide along this way. So that is a safer way to pin, and then that way my hand isn't coming up against the pointy edges. We will pin this securely around the whole entire perimeter of the pattern, so you can space it apart a few inches, depending on just how comfortable you are with cutting your pieces out. So you'll just continue to go along the edges and pin around the whole outside of the pattern. Okay, so here we have the pieces pinned and flat, and I'm just going to show you how we cut them out. So you take your scissors and you can guide this carefully with your hand here to start. Cut right along the edge of the pattern piece. Don't cut through the paper and don't leave excess fabric. So it should cut right along this outside edge. So I just put my hand on here to hold this in place. The scissors just guide along. I have a cutting mat underneath my fabric, and you just kind of follow the line as you cut around. And you can see right here, so then we have this cut right along. It's still pinned, and we're cutting out these 2 pieces. So what I would do is, as I'm cutting, this is a small piece of fabric so I can kind of rotate it, or you can walk around your table, and then you just continue following the outside edge and cutting out the pattern. Another technique that you can use is the rotary cutter. So for this one, you just want to be extra careful and just realize that this blade is very sharp. So as you're cutting with it, just take your time and carefully cut out around the pieces. But this might be an easier option for you depending on just your mobility of your hands. So I'll just show you real quick. I've pulled back the blade cover here, so my blade is exposed. And then I'm going to come over here and just on this smaller pattern piece, I'm going to cut out and just let it roll right along the edge. So my hands are out of the way, the pins are out of the way, but you still have to hold it firmly, and it is being cut on a cutting mat. But you just, with a little bit of pressure, just let it go and it rolls. I've paused right here just so I can show you there's this tiny little, the center notch mark. You'll want to come in here and cut, and then just cut like a small little triangle that comes up and then back down right over this notch mark line, and then continue cutting all the way around here. So here you have the piece that's cut out, and you can see right here is the notch mark line, and then right here is how I've cut right along the edge, and then right up in here we've got this tiny little triangle. So that is your notch, and then as we put the pattern together, and this notch is meant to match up with the center of the shoulder seam, which is explained in the pattern. So as you get to that part, that's what that will help you identify. So after that, what we're left with is a front and back piece here. So we have two, and then the two side pieces, which are all the cut pieces that are needed for this particular pattern.